Detective Dennis Wustenhoff bled to death hours after someone blew up his unmarked car in front of their Patchogue home.
His death left neighbors on this quiet street shocked and angry.
Upset, absurd, disgusting. This was a nice family. They had 3 children. Now they're left with no father. Decent people live in this area.
Wustenhoff had been on the force for 19 and a half years, was a top undercover detective who trained many other undercover officers in the department.
It appears pretty clear that he was probably assassinated. What remains unclear at this point is by whom and for what reason.
Police at the time described it as an assassination, possibly linked to his work as an undercover narcotics detective.
31 years ago, your husband, an undercover police officer, decorated war hero, he'd been in Vietnam, right?
Yes.
He was killed suddenly in a mysterious car bombing. And all these years later, his death is still unsolved.
Yes.
And are you any closer in your mind and heart to a resolution?
In my heart, yes. Yes.
You think you know what happened?
Oh, I know what happened.
So you're clear.
I am absolutely clear, yes.
Let's unfold this so people know kind of what went on. So, Fran, how long were you and Dennis married when this happened?
We were married for approximately 16 and a half years.
Describe the morning of his death. What was it like, and what was the last thing he said to you?
I got the children off to school, and I was working part-time in our local school district.
What were you doing?
I was a teacher's aide.
Okay.
He was still there, and we said our goodbyes, have a good day, and I went to work. This particular day was rainy, so we couldn't go outside for recess. Then there was a knock at the door of the classroom, and the principal was there. And he said that there had been an accident with my husband. And I thought, an accident? You know, I left him at home. He didn't have to go to work until later that day. You know, and something about maybe a car accident. Was he changing a tire? Did the car fall on him or something? And as we were walking up the hall of the school, at the end of the hall was a police officer standing there waiting for me.
What did you think when you saw the police officer standing there?
My mind went blank, and I thought, why is a police officer coming to get me if there was an accident at home? But I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, okay, he's at the hospital. And we took off for the hospital, and he started going real fast, and his radio was on, and they mentioned something about an explosion near the Ford dealer. Now, the Ford dealer is right around the corner from my house, and I thought, oh my gosh, what happened at the Ford dealer? And all of a sudden, the police officer reached over and turned off the radio. And in my mind, I thought, that's very strange. Then my children arrived at some point, and I thought, why did they bring my children to the hospital? And we were in a conference room, and they told us what was going on. They were absolutely petrified, probably from the minute they walked out of their classrooms.
I was in my 7th period English class. I remember the phone ringing in the classroom, the teacher having a fast call and hanging it up and instructing me, Kevin, go to the principal's office.
So I get to the main office, and there were 2 police officers in there. And then I was sat down and told my dad had an accident.
When I got in the police car, my brother and sister were in there, and I felt like happy to see them, but also like confused and scared even more. And my sister just kept telling me, you know, over and over again, like, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay, everything's gonna be, and she was like trying to comfort me, and I was just crying hysterically.
And when you're 12 years old and you're in the back of a police car that is humming through the roads with its lights and siren going, it's kind of a lot to take in.
How long were you in that conference room before you got an update?
We were probably there about 3 hours. And then a doctor came in and asked me to step outside the room. I don't remember his exact words. He told me he was gone. And I don't remember this happening, but my children said they could hear me scream so loud, which scared them to death.
I don't know if you want to call it a cry or a yelp or a scream. It was, to date, still the most awful, horrible thing. Things that nightmares are made of.
I can still hear it. We just knew when my mom screamed that he was gone.
The police originally said it was likely a revenge killing. Did they give you any information about what he was into at that point?
No, they still just, they told me that, yes, it probably had to do with what he did for a living, had to do with drugs, and just, don't worry, we're gonna get them. And I said, okay, I just wanted to be with my children, and let the police do what they do best.
And you described you couldn't go home because it was a crime scene, and
No.
This is the car that exploded?
That's his car.
And this is right in front of the house?
That's right in front of our house, the grass in the street that my children played in every day.
Yeah, they could have been
That's
right
our
there.
house.
The windows were blown out. I mean, if someone had been in the home, they'd have been injured, right? With the glass and,
Possibly,
and
yeah.
everything. And the kids could have been playing in the yard there.
Sure.
So there was a complete disregard for collateral damage. I mean, look at the roof of that car. This was a serious explosion, obviously.
My older brother and sister-in-law, they opened up their arms to us, and we went and stayed at their house for a week maybe or so. While we were at my brother's house for that week, the kids couldn't go outside and play. There were police everywhere in front of my brother's house, inside the house with us.
We were not allowed to go outside. We weren't allowed to watch TV without permission. They had installed an electronic alarm in the house that if you pushed it, it was a panic button.
We didn't know if someone was going to try to kill us.
We went into hiding, essentially, at my aunt and uncle's house. I literally was allowed to get one phone call to my best friend.
I just wanted to go home, and I couldn't.
They wouldn't let us watch TV. They wouldn't let us read the newspapers. They didn't want us to see what was going on. Although, I don't know if it was the next day or the Saturday, I couldn't sleep, and I was up very early in the morning, and I went and snuck one of the newspapers. I wanted to see what was going on. And as I was turning the pages, the police commissioner, I believe it was at the time, put out a statement and saying that they weren't going to ignore the possibility that this could be a personal vendetta.
Your husband was a good husband. He was a good father, but you didn't have a perfect marriage.
The last couple of years of our marriage, he had an affair. He met this woman through work. Her husband also was a police officer in the next county over. Initially, the families became friends, and we spent time together. But shortly after meeting them, the wife, I was getting uncomfortable vibes being around her. And when I saw how she and my husband interacted, made me uncomfortable.
So he was a police officer, and he worked with explosives.
Yes.
And months prior to your husband being blown up with explosives placed in his car, he's caught with this man's wife. Then you read in the paper, this may have been a personal vendetta. And you know one person that's got a vendetta. And so now you start thinking about this guy sitting over there giving him this 1,000-yard stare, never saying anything but clocking it all.
Yeah.
So the man whose wife is cheating on him with your husband knows how to build and detonate a bomb. And your husband is ultimately blown up.
Yes.
You can't ignore that.
No, absolutely not.
You don't know this. I don't know this. We also know he was an undercover police officer. We know he was busting up a drug ring. We know there were possibilities of cartel involvement. But we also know the man whose wife was cheating on him with your husband knew how to build and detonate a bomb.
Yes.
And 9 months later, your husband is blown up with a bomb.
Yes.
Was he ever named as a suspect or a person of interest?
I guess he's a person of interest.
Ever arrested?
No. The minute this happened, he has a lawyer.
They looked at his cars, right?
Yes, they did. And I think, as they say, you know, there was trace evidence.
Well, bottom line, do you think your husband was murdered because he was in a love triangle?
I do, absolutely.
And you want answers?
Absolutely.
And I understand the conflict and the restrictions of your position, but to be very clear, you're just interested in justice. You just want to know what's the truth.
Of course.
I mean, that's what you all want to know, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
all
if this
it
was a
is.
cartel situation, you want to know it was a cartel situation. If it was a personal vendetta, you want to know that. Whatever it was, you want the answer.
That's all it's about, yeah.
Is this being investigated actively? Are they working on this?
We're told that the FBI is currently active on it, which is a big move that was made about a year ago.
You have been looking into this. Tell me what you've seen so far. What's the evidence? And why hasn't there been an arrest?
There were a couple of things that really troubled me, Dr. Phil. I mean, if we look at this thing behaviorally, it would appear that the intended day for this homicide would have been Valentine's Day. And isn't it just amazing that this man takes the day off to take a little girl to a dance instead? You can't think about that and not think how predatory that alone is and how much anger is being exhibited in the picking of the spot for something like this to happen.
So your theory is that that bomb was in place on February 14th, but that car didn't move on February 14th because he took that day off to take Melissa to the dance.
That's exactly what my thinking would be.
And
Doc.
then he moves the car on February 15th and the bomb goes off.
Yes.
There's a certain point where you cross from psychological composition to evil. So we look for what moves people and motivates people. Is there any physical evidence that ties this together?
Well, number one, the physical evidence is so profound, just the physical evidence of the damage to Dennis, the placement of that bomb seems to be so interesting. But the forensics I find interesting, the forensics that this chemical found in Dennis's car that's tied to a compound called Tovex that's used by bomb squads. That same chemical, according to media reports, is found inside of Haran's vehicle that was owned by his father, but he's known to be driving. And then I think it's interesting that that same chemical is found in other materials from the police department that he works for that has similar kinds of compounds. So all of a sudden you got these really interesting forensic pieces. Now my hope is that there is forensics that we don't know about, and as we've advanced forensically, that there might be things that now 31 years later that we couldn't do then.
I think this is a solvable crime, and my hope is that by y'all having the courage to come here and walk through this again, which I know is very painful to do, we can keep this energized and hopefully we can get some answers. This cannot go unsolved. You deserve answers. There deserves to be accountability here.
Thank you.
That's what we're all about.
And we appreciate the forum that you've given us for this. It's important to let people know that it is never too late to send information forward. It's never too late to make a phone call. There is a reward in place for it.
Well, hopefully this will come to fruition sooner rather than later. You guys have waited long enough. Bob Haran has never been arrested or charged with anything in connection to Dennis' murder, despite being named a person of interest in the initial investigation. We reached out to his attorney, but did not receive a response back at the time of this airing. Haran has denied any involvement in Dennis Wustinoff's death. In 1990, New York undercover detective was killed suddenly in a mysterious car bomb. Do you have a feeling about what happened?
I know what happened.
Do you think your husband was murdered because he was in a love triangle?
A Dr. Phil exclusive. Check your local listings.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.